we will go over briefly our lesson last week, what we covered, and then we'll get into the rest of the lesson that we did not cover. So I think we will probably get through maybe a little earlier tonight because we've gone through 2.5 pages, I think, or yeah, and we only have like a page and a half left. And then we'll get into the questions. So we might be done in an hour. So it'll be a little quicker tonight. I do have a handout I'm going to send out tonight. It's a review. There's just reading material and looking up text. And so I'll send that out tonight. It's a review on pretty much what we've been learning, at least since chapter 12. But I'll go over that more later. Good, well, let's get started and we'll see what the Lord has in store for us tonight. Okay. Loving Father, thank you for bringing us back all together. We are grateful for the blessings you've given to us. As this year is winding to a close, just a few more weeks, and the country is in dire need of a thankful heart, especially in light of what's happened this year. But we have much to be grateful for when we see what's happening in Europe and Australia and other parts of the world. It's evidence that the end of all things is nearing a final climax. And so we want to be ready. Teach us tonight what you have. This is the message that has to go to the world in all its glory, the three angels of Revelation 14. So we thank you. Teach us what you have in store. Cleanse our hearts. Give us meek and lowly hearts and minds that we may hear your voice. Thank you for hearing. Thank you for answering. May your spirit be here and holy angels and banish the powers of darkness so that we can concentrate on thee. In Jesus' name. Amen. Okay. One thing I noticed I did not do last week, I just put up a little bit ago, last week's study on the website, so you can look at that at will. But one thing I have noticed, I did not put up, oh, there's Ellen. She popped up now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I did not put up last week's file. Let's see if it's here. And,
yeah, I was trying to look for it. I couldn't find it. So, but I saw the previous week.
Here we go. Okay. Let me bring it in. I'm just going to spend a minute on it. So for the recording, let's do that. Okay. So this is what, Ellen, for your sake also, what we did, this was last week's lesson as we got into the third angel's message, part 1, verse 9. If any man worship the beast and his image. I decided to just take a bunch of spirit of prophecy statements and kind of put some thoughts to them. And we just went through and read them and discussed them. Here we have GC 594 and volume 1 of the testimonies, another GC statement. And we went through all of these. And then we got down here, and this is where we'll pick up on. I think we just finished the early writing statement last week, and we got into the 7 BC. So, and then at the bottom, when we get done here, we will have a few questions to discuss. So I just wanted to put this up for a minute for the recording so people will know what lesson goes along with tonight's study. So if you have your printouts and you want to follow along with your printouts, feel free to do so. So as I had mentioned about the first statement, in great controversy, we looked at the fearful judgments of worshiping the beast in his image. And the two things that were mentioned there, what the mark of the beast is and how to avoid receiving it. And she quotes Timothy, the masses of the people turn away their ears from hearing the truth and are turned into fables. I'll do this so I can read it off the screen. Whoops. And we will do this. Okay, there we go. The second statement, it mentioned the two classes of people, one of the great bodies of professed Christians trampling upon God's law and bowing to the papal institution. The other class, few in number, who keep the fourth commandment, bowing to the great lawgiver. So we went over that. The name Seventh-day Adventist is a standing rebuke to the Protestant world. Here is the line of distinction between the worshipers of God and those who worship the beast and receive his mark. And we looked at that. Then the next page, page 2, we found out that when legislators shall abjure the principles of Protestantism and give countenance in the right hand of fellowship to Romanism. This is a very interesting statement because it says God will then interpose. The fact that it says when legislators shall abjure the principles of Protestantism, that's a big hint that we're dealing with what country?
Our country.
Our country, absolutely, because the U.S. of A has primarily been the bastion of Protestantism. Not that there aren't Protestants in other countries, but they haven't had the freedoms we have had. So this indicates to me that the national Sunday law, God is going to interpose in some way for his honor and the salvation of his people. The principles necessary for our youth to cultivate must be kept before them in their daily education. That when the decree shall go forth requiring all to worship the beast, they may make right decisions and not waver in their confidence of the law of God. Okay, GC 604 and 5, we looked at that. There will be those who, because of human enactments, trample on God's law. And again, we see two classes implicated there. One, accepting sign of submission to earthly powers, receive the mark of the beast. The other, choosing the token of allegiance to divine authority, receive the seal of God. And we had that one line from 9T, at the time of enforcement of Sunday observance, devote the day to missionary effort. We talked about that I think there's a statement, Ellen White says, open the churches and invite people in, preach the truth, or do house-to-house work. We'll have, for a time, opportunity to do that. Then I talked about this when and then business under this statement, GC at the bottom. When Sunday observance shall be enforced, then whosoever shall transgress the command of God, they'll honor popery. That is what worshiping the beast and images. Okay, going on to early writings, top of page 3. That was a pretty serious vision that the servant of the Lord had. She begged the angel to remove it from her. Terror seized me at the bottom there. I fell upon my face and begged him to remove it from me. It was too dreadful to behold. Then I realized as never before the importance of searching the word of God carefully to know how to escape the plagues, which the word declares shall come on all the ungodly who shall worship the beast in his image. We can begin to see what is happening in our world today, how the ruling classes of nations are warring against their common citizens with all these mandates. And people should be searching the word of God, because one of the plagues we're all dealing with is a pandemic. And it, we'll see what comes from it, but obviously we know where this is leading. Okay, so let's go on to, I think we stopped right here at 7 BC. Why don't we do this? We've got 5 of us, we're all here on the call. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we've got 5 segments. So Deanne, why don't you take the first, Elena the second, Ellen the third, my wife can take the fourth, and I'll take the fifth.
We're starting at preparing for the image of the beast.
Yeah, go ahead and read that and then we'll discuss it.
Already preparations are advancing and movements are in progress, which will result in making an image to the beast. Events will be brought about in the earth's history that will fulfill the predictions of prophecy for these last days.
Okay.
Okay, my turn. Tested by the image, the Lord has shown me clearly that the image of the beast will be formed before probation closes, for it is to be the great test for the people of God, by which their eternal destiny will be decided. Revelation 13:13-17.
Okay, before Ellen, you read next, let's just take these 2 statements because there's a number of things going on here. Back to Deanne's statement. The first line indicates movements are in progress. There's another statement in, I think it's volume 5, that she says the Sunday bill is Sunday movement is making its way in darkness. This kind of goes along with what we see here, because obviously the image of the beast is involved in that. And many people are not even aware of it right now, because their focus is on other things happening in our world. But there is coming a time, I think every Seventh-day Adventist has their eyes open and ears watching the strain amongst the nations, the governments, our government. What is going to lead us from here to there? Are we going to have a change in what's happening in our country, or are things going to worsen until the Sunday crisis comes in through the environmental deal, climate change legislation? We really don't know yet. I tend to doubt it, just because we're told we're going to see a great the false religious awakening. Well, nobody's having any religious awakening, at least not. We did more so under the former president than we are under this one. So we'll have to wait and see what things are going to come in the future. But I wanted to definitely make note that when it said movements are in progress, which will result in making an image to the beast, that sounds similar to that 5T statement that says it's making its way in darkness. Any thoughts, ladies, on that statement? Or no? We can go on to the one Elena wrote next, or read next. So here's the statement I have often thought about that the image of the beast, Christ, must be formed before probation closes because
the people of God have to.
It's the great test for the people of God. Obviously, it will be the test for the world, but we have to be tested by it first. So that's where that statement comes from, 7 BC. And you'd have to actually go into the book or look it up in the CD-ROM to see what the original source material, because these are all taken from different, like the one above, Deanne read, it's a review and herald statement. I didn't put that here. I don't know why, but it's, you can look it up if you have the book or CD-ROM, and it will tell you where the original source material was. Okay, Ellen, you want to read the next paragraph?
It says, this is the test that the people of God must have before they are sealed. All who prove their loyalty, excuse me, all who prove their loyalty to God by observing his law and refusing to accept a spurious Sabbath will rank under the banner of the Lord God Jehovah and will receive the seal of the living God. Those who yield the truth of heavenly origin and accept the Sunday Sabbath will receive the mark of the beast. Letter 11, 1890. Should I read further?
No, that's good. I don't know if it can be said any clearer than that. I mean, this is about as clear as it gets.
Yeah.
And I think this is why some of those who have left the church have a problem with Ellen White, because there's no wiggle room in this statement. And people who don't want to accept this truth, you either got to get rid of the prophet or you've got to come into line, because it's very clear what we're dealing with. It talks about the sealing, the two issues in the great contest, the spurious Sabbath, and of course, it's interesting here. Well, no, it doesn't even mention the true Sabbath. Just talks about observing his law.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously it's implicated. Those who yield, so those who give up the truth, you know who that would be.
So the Sunday.
God's people who apostatize and they're not sealed and they end up accepting the Sabbath Sunday. They receive the mark of the beast. So in the first statement, you have all who prove their loyalty, refusing this. It's very interesting that the style that she's using here, she's going back and forth. All who prove their loyalty and refuse the spurious Sabbath will receive the seal of God, where those who give up the truth receive the mark of the beast. Very interesting. Okay, Han, you want to read the next statement?
Yeah, I wanted to find the statement that I was reading today, because on these two statements, where it says the great test for the people of God by which their eternal destiny will be decided. So I was reading that statement today about, in some people's view, that when I was reading to you, their great reformation will be that they reject the pillars of the church. So if you plug that statement into these statements, that's why there's going to be so many people that are not going to be looking, I think, for what's happening, because I've never read this statement before. She says, the enemy of the souls has sought to bring in the supposition that a great reformation was to take place among Seventh-day Adventists. Mm-hmm. And that this reformation would consist in giving up the doctrines which stand as the pillars of our faith.
Wow.
So they're seeing a reformation coming in that are, and you know, I've heard some of these that have, like Brenner's wife that has left, you know, they're not in the organized church or whatever. But anyway, they've said how free they feel. They feel that they're away from all of that that's been pushed into their head that's not true. And now the truth is, you know, freeing to them. But I read this and then she says, who has the authority to begin such a movement? We have our Bibles, we have our experience attested to by the miraculous workings of the Holy Spirit. We have a truth that admits of no compromise. Shall we not repudiate everything that is not in harmony with the truth? And she talks about that statement is in First Selected Messages 204 to 205. But the part that just, to me, it just, and so when you're reading these statements, I'm thinking, wow, I can see why so many of our people, even though they've been told for so long, right, the truth, that she says the great test, this is going to be the great test for God's people. Well, it's going to be a real great test because they're not, they're on a different wavelength, basically. So they're not even seeing this coming. That's why I think a lot of people right now aren't seeing this coming. So anyway, that statement just really, you know, I've never read that statement before. So I was shocked when I read it, you know, what they consist as Reformation. So.
A contra-Reformation.
Correct. Yeah, when she read that this morning, I started thinking about what's been happening in our world the last few years, in the church even. And the separation that we see now has been it worked for years, but it's become more stark now. And it's evident from what she just read that people will give up the doctrines. It's really alarming to see what is happening in the church, not just what we see in the world, but even in the church. Okay. So, hon, you want to read that next statement, apostasy and national ruin?
Yeah. When the Protestant churches shall unite with the secular power to sustain a false religion, for opposing which their ancestors endured the fiercest persecution, when the state shall use its power to enforce the decrees and sustain the institutions of the church, then will Protestant America have formed an image to the papacy, and there will be a national apostasy, which will end only in national ruin.
You know, again, there's no wiggle room here. You know, it's very detailed. It's not a long statement. We have acknowledgement of who is going to unite with the secular power, from which, you know, those who have gone before have endured fiercest persecution, who opposed, or I guess the union of the Protestant churches will oppose that which their ancestors endured. When the state shall use its power to enforce the decrees, and sustain the institutions of the church. This is one reason why I'm just having a hard time with the administration leading out in this country presently. That would become a reality because they're going after Christians, not trying to move in a direction that would fulfill this. But, and I think we've all heard the argument, well, Sunday legislation will come in through the secular side first. And they're using that as justification with this climate bill. Well, that's a possibility, but right now we're seeing the dragon-like features of the lamb-like beast, but not in the realm of worship, but in the realm of medicine, health. You either take you do what we say, or we're going to crack down on you. So the elements of the dragon-like beast is there, but it's not yet in the religious sector. And that's why we have, I think, all heard the phrase, well, this is the test run for what we know is coming. I have a hard time reading this statement, thinking that this current administration is going to do this. Now, it's a possibility. It seems more likely that something like this could happen under the former president with all of the evangelicals in support, of him. But as my wife was telling me the other day, the Lord may work in such a different way than any of us realize to see how this thing's going to come about. It might blindside us. We know it's coming, but we don't yet see how. So this is a very interesting statement. Several months ago, this last phrase, there will be a national apostasy, which will end only in national ruin. I looked that up. She mentions that 5 times in her writings, 5 times. And only 1 time does she say it will follow the national apostasy quickly. So I've thought, well, this is quite interesting because it's only 1 time she says that. She doesn't say it more than once, but she does say it once. Whether that means a few months or weeks, we don't know. And I can't tell you where it's found. You just take this phrase, national apostasy will follow national ruin. You stick that in her writings and all 5 statements will come up. And one of them says it will happen quickly. Okay, any thoughts on this statement before we go to the next? No?
In agreement in what you were saying earlier about the current administration, because the other one was basically so in bed with the evangelicals, versus this one. And the only thing I have focused on myself is in Revelation 13, the power that this country has to have. Well, she has a statement, and she says, and the statement that the beast with the 2 horns causes the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast. And then this is where she says, indicates that the authority of this nation, so the United States, this nation, is to be exercised in enforcing some observance which shall be an act of homage to the papacy. So the authority of this nation is to be exercised in enforcing it. So this nation has to get back up on top in order for it to force the other nations, which right now that can't happen. I mean, anyway, she says that in GC 442 and 443. she has a section under the United States foreseen in prophecy. So that's kind of in what you were saying, that we're just not, we see the lamb-like beast, yes, be tyrannical right now, definitely, but not in the worship spectrum from what she's saying. I'm just going by what she's saying, and she uses that for Revelation 13, 11 through 15, those verses. So something else has to happen. You know, I don't know what, like I said, it could totally blindside us, but the religious element has to come in stronger than it is right now.
Good point, dear. Another thought on that. Ladies, are you aware what, I mean, it's been happening in Italy, but it's spreading all over Europe this weekend. There are riots everywhere.
Yeah, in Romania.
If you were to have a Sunday law through this, that's not the time. Everybody's focused on these mandates and these restrictions.
Yeah. Yeah, in Romania, people are protesting because the children are protesting with their parent. They do not want school online. They want to go to school face to face.
Right.
They don't open the schools.
Wow.
Yeah. They are so upset because you see there, the families are large families. They are not 2 kids in the house. They have 7 children in houses. And they say, we cannot manage. The mother has to stay home and see them doing their homework, and they fight if they don't have enough devices. And it's just like a crisis in the family, you know, it's too much. So, and the poor inspectors are listening to the parent and said, sorry, we understand, we want the school open, but the health department is not letting us, the government doesn't let us what we can do, you know.
So that's all over then, just like us, when we hear Austria, Germany, yeah. What is that? Was it Norway or was it Netherlands, Sweden, and Rome or Italy?
Italy.
I think Sweden, they didn't have anything because they don't have mandates.
Maybe it's not Sweden. It was Netherlands. But
there was a country, hon, do you remember that even the law enforcement said we're not
yeah, it was that I can't remember the name.
And they took up sides with the people, the protesters.
Yeah, they said we're not going to lock them in their homes, because I know that like in Austria, they won't, the mandate's going to hit, what did they say, February
1. Everybody in the country has to
they can't, if they have their vaccine, they can go out to work and they can go get food. But if you don't have it, then you cannot go out at all.
So that's only 2 months away in a week. Yeah. So people are just said, enough with this tyranny. And we will see what the coming weeks will hold. But obviously on a worldwide scale, we are seeing
people are troubled.
We know it's going to come about under the Sunday crisis. But I don't think we're going to see the resistance we're seeing now. We shall see. Okay, let's go on. So let me read the next 2. The mark of apostasy in God's patience. There are many who have never had the light. They are deceived by their teachers. They have not received the mark of the beast. The Lord is working with them. He has not left them to their own ways until they shall be convicted of the truth and trample upon the evidence given to enlighten them. The Lord will not withdraw his grace from them. Also, the mark of the beast cannot be placed on anybody until we get to that crisis. Because they have to have the light shining on them on the subject before they can, and be convicted of the truth. Before that happens. Okay. Any thoughts on that before I read the last one here? Okay, let me read the last one. The decree enforcing the worship of this day is to go forth to all the world. This is obviously when it becomes international. In a limited degree, it has already gone forth. In several places, the civil power is speaking with the voice of a dragon. Here we are.
Yeah.
Just as the heathen king spoke to the Hebrew captives. Yeah. But I think she was also referring to in the 1888 crisis, where this Blair bill was before the Senate. And A.T. Jones went down, put it on the calendar every time they brought it up. Shortly after Minneapolis, which was the last week of October, I think, and the first few days of November, he had to be, and back then you just don't pop on a train or well, I guess you could on a train, they had trains, but on an airplane or get in your car and drive.
Pony Express.
You had to go either, well, you had trains, but it was, horse and buggy. And so it took a few days to get from one state to another. But he had to be, I think it was in early December, he had to be before the Senate and to once again to defend. So every time it came up on their calendar, he was there to say, no, we can't have this pass. God used him. Definitely. Okay. Any thoughts? Dan? No? Okay. Okay, let's go to page 4. History will be repeated. False religion will be exalted. The first day of the week, a common working day possessing no sanctity whatever, will be set up as was the image at Babylon. All nations and tongues and peoples will be commanded to worship this spurious Sabbath. This is Satan's plan to make of no account the day instituted by God and given to the world as a memorial of creation. Yes, indeed. And once again, like we see with these mandates, how it can become global. Yeah. Okay, Deanne, why don't you read the next statement and we'll just kind of go right down there. From there, we got just a couple more and maybe Elena on the 4T statement.
GC 627, 628. When Christ ceases his intercession in the sanctuary, the unmingled wrath threatened against those who worship the beast and his image and receive his mark, Revelation 14, will be poured out.
Yeah.
So here we have a statement that is clearly indicated what's going to happen to those who worship the beast and when it happens, the wrath poured out. Absolutely. This statement I actually could have put, because I'll just mention it now. Next week, I'm going to continue on because I think this format works pretty good. I'm going to continue on. If you notice at the top of page 1, these are statements I took out of the book that I guess the White Estate put out years ago on EGY comments. Exhaustive commentary on the book Revelation. This is just verse 9.
Yeah.
I haven't included verse 10 or verse 11, but I think next week I will do that. I would like to get through this chapter by the end of the year, but that might be a little more challenging. we still got half the chapter to go. So we'll see how we do. But I figure if we can finish up next week, the three angels messages, or the next 2 weeks, and then 2 weeks in December for the last, what is that, 8 verses, we might make it. Okay, last statement. Elena, you want to read that 4T statement?
Okay, the 4T.
Correct.
If the believers in the truth are not sustained by their faith in these comparatively peaceful days, what will uphold them when the grand test comes and the decree goes forth against all those who will not worship the image of the beast and receive his mark in their foreheads or in the hands? This solemn period is not far off. Instead of becoming weak and irresolute, the people of God should be gathering strength and courage for the time of trouble. 4T to
okay, thank you. There's a text in Jeremiah I want you to look at.
Yeah.
It kind of came to mind when I put this. I didn't make any notes.
When Jeremiah was rebuked by the Lord.
Jeremiah 12:5.
Yeah.
Especially that when it talks about if we will not be sustained, if believers are not to be sustained by their faith in these comparatively peaceful days, how are they going to be upheld when a great test comes? So Jeremiah 12:5 says, if thou hast run with the footmen and they have wearied thee,
yeah,
then how canst thou contend with horses? And if in the land of peace, in the peaceful time, thou trustest, and they weary thee, then how wilt thou do in the swelling of Jordan? Now, the swelling of Jordan, I've heard different people say different things what that means. I think it has to do with the latter rain, the swelling of the Jordan River. The swelling of the Jordan is dealing with God pours out his spirit, at least in my mind. The Jordan, the water, when you have a lot of rain, the rivers rise. So when God pours out the latter rain, you're going to see people rise up, take hold of the message, and many will come into the fold. So if in the land of peace where you trusted it, you're wearied, how are you going to do when that time comes in the swelling of Jordan? And I think this is, in a sense, this is what she's saying here. How are we going to survive the main test when that decree? Now, notice this, ladies. I don't know if you picked this up. What will uphold them when the grand test comes and the decree goes forth against all those who will not worship the image of the beast and receive his mark in their foreheads or in their hands? What is that decree?
Would that be the Sunday law?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. I guess it would have to. My mind kind of just went to the, because the statement ends with the time of trouble.
Mm-hmm.
I got to it. You're probably right, but in a broader sense, it could also be the death decree. Because the Sunday law decree will eventually lead to legislation saying, you know what? Satan will show up claiming to be Christ. And he says, but I've changed the day. You got to get rid of all of these people, these little small group of people over here that are standing in the way of the climate change. That could be part of the argument. They are causing all these disasters worldwide. They need to be dealt with harshly. And a decree will finally go forward. Put them to death after a certain date. Death decree. So this could implicate that as well. We shall see. Any thoughts on that before we read our last statement? No thoughts? And I think just like we see with all these lockdowns and mandates, it's going to be a process that harsher, that refines, you know, bribery at first, then fines, then jail sentence. And we're already hearing, well, Australia,
the fines, yeah.
They're taking them into these re-education camps, we hear already. Yeah. So we know what is coming when we get to this point. Nobody knows how long this process will be. God may have to cut it short just to save his people. I have for the last few years thought it's going to be a 3.5-year period because of this prophecy in Daniel 12 or time frame. But I don't know. I mean, if things get, God might have to cut things short. I talked to Larry the other night on the phone. That was who just called me. He thinks we're going to see Sunday laws next year, and by the following year, time of trouble. I said, wow, that's really short. I mean, that's 2 years, we're all done. Could it happen that quick? I don't know. You know, we'll see. We'll see. But all right, let's read this last statement. Who would like to read this? Who hasn't read it? Ellen, would you want to finish us off with this last statement?
The EW 62.
Early writing.
I mean 67.
67, yeah.
Okay, point 2. As I saw what we must be in order to inherit glory, and then saw how much Jesus had suffered to obtain for us so rich an inheritance, I prayed that we might be baptized into Christ's suffering, that we might not shrink at trials. But my paper can't read the yellow.
Oh, really? It's
but
green.
Bear with them with patience and joy, knowing what Jesus had suffered, that we through his poverty and sufferings might be made rich. Said the angel, deny self, ye must step fast. Some of us have had time to get the truth and to advance step by step. And every step we have taken has given us strength to take the next. But now time is almost finished, and what we have been years learning, they will have to learn in a few months. They will also have much to unlearn and much to learn again. Those who would not receive the mark of the beast and his image when the decree goes forth must have decision now to say, nay, we will not regard the institution of the beast.
Wow. I don't think it is by accident we are going over this subject matter right in the very heat of what we see happening in our world. True, we started the book of Revelation right when COVID began, about a week before. But we didn't, I mean, these lockdowns and stuff, this has only been in recent months, these mandates and weeks even, you know, we're talking about. And even here in America, if it wasn't for this court case,
Yeah.
the Sixth Circuit Court in DC that put a stay on the Biden administration's mandate through OSHA. OSHA had to back off because the court said, no, at least temporarily. We'll see in the coming weeks if what happens there. But Mary and I were just hearing today, there was a reporter in the UK, and he was saying, if you think in America it's not coming to you, better wake up. It's coming to America too.
Well, if our church is capitulating, the head of our church, then.
Yeah, I don't know, ladies, if you heard anything. We heard it on Sabbath, and it was very, very disturbing news.
What?
Various conferences around the country under the NAD are telling, I don't know if it's all the same date, but they're telling that their pastors better be vaccinated by a certain date or they are going to lose their employment.
Oh, really?
It's January 4th.
Wow.
They have, but right now the conference says there's a stay on it because of the court. But if that lifts, they're saying, the GC is saying they cannot afford the fine. So not only are pastors going to be let go, but all employees.
All employees, if you're not
and the churches will be closed or what?
Well, let's just take, if 30% of the general population has refused the vaccine right now, and that's approximately about the ratio in the church, you're going to terminate 30% of the employees in all the churches and all the conferences. You're going to have to shut churches by the dozens.
They're already doing that in the hospitals right now.
Absolutely. So, you know, we are living in perilous times for our church to be doing mandates, and they're using an excuse, well, we can't, we're not going to resist the penalties. We got to pay them if we don't comply.
We thought it was just Idaho, but they said then, what was it? Kentucky,
Tennessee conference has already capitulated.
They said it's going to go all through all the church, all over.
All the conferences nationwide under the NAD. And I'm thinking, are you serious? Where's the faith of our leadership that God can steer this church in the right direction, regardless of what the government mandates? And I put that down when we get to it in our prayer segment, but I think we really need to be praying for our leaders in the conferences, the unions, because I mean, this is almost a nightmare scenario for the Adventist church. If this happens, you're gonna see home churches sprout up everywhere. And maybe now's the time, but maybe this is just a warning or a test of what's coming.
Maybe this will be the dismantling of, because we know that the church as it is now will not be what will be when, you know, it won't be. So maybe this is, I don't know, I'm just saying, maybe this is part of the dismantling of the form of the church structure. And I'm sure a lot of pastors are going to have to probably just take early retirement now. Because look, Pastor Kirby even told us, he says and I don't know if he'll change, I pray not, but he says he will not take he doesn't want to be vaccinated. So I'm just saying, so it's going to hit here because look at how California is. It's going to hit here. So maybe a lot of pastors will just take early retirement. But think of all the employees that are going to be let go.
So it's just, I mean, for this thing to be even discussed, and some conferences are already making the decision, I'm thinking, wow, are we really there? Is now the time we're going to see this move in that direction for our people? So we need to be really praying that some conferences say, you know what, we're not going along with this. It's one thing if people want to take it on their own volition, but we're not doing that to our people. Okay. This last phrase in the statement that Ellen read in early writings, which says, must have decision now to say nay, we will not regard. I put down under that must have decision now, I put a phrase, the kingly power of the will. In the book, My Life Today, 318, she talks about this power decision, the kingly power of man. It's the governing power in the nature of man. There's two Bible verses that help support that. If anybody ever asks you, well, where does it talk about in the Bible, the power of the will or decision? Proverbs 16:3. Proverbs 16:3, Solomon says, commit thy works unto the Lord, and thy thoughts shall be established. And when you commit yourself to the Lord, you make that your decision, your will. I'm not going to do this. And the battle's half won right there. You just need the power from the Lord to enforce your stand on it. And the other one is Romans 6:16 through 18, where Paul talks about whom ye yield yourselves servants to obey, his servants you are. It's dealing with the will. What
page in My Life Today was that?
318. It's a great passage. I think Hillary just read it like a week ago. And I thought, man, I gotta take that. Man, I went and Xeroxed the page and I look at it every day now. It's such a great statement.
318.
318, My Life Today. It is dealing with the power of the will. Okay, let's get to our discussion question for maybe 10 minutes and we'll wrap this up. Why does the third angel's message begin in the negative? Note the second angel's message also. And I gave a hint. So does anybody have any thoughts on that? I know we have a professor over here in the making. She's looking like she's really contemplating this. So why do you think God would put this in the negative?
And then you said even the commandments are...
The majority of them, correct.
Yeah. But
I think like you put here that it's kind of like a command. When you are commanding somebody, like we are talking about a decree, it's an enforcement of an idea to say, you shall do this. He's not asking, are you able to do this or can you do this? But it's kind of like a command.
Okay.
And I wrote here, the time is short, the message is urgent. The probation is closing. Mm-hmm. Yes, the 10 Commandments and these are written by the God's finger. He had the right to ask us that way. It's God's command.
Okay, that's getting a little bit closer to what I'm looking at. But it's really I'm just looking for a simple answer. When God says something in the negative versus the positive, what kind of response is that supposed to invoke in the human?
Obedience. I think it's like when you talk to a child Don't go there, there's fire. Don't open this door. I'm going away. Do not open this door. The child has to obey and abide by the...
So it's alarm.
Yeah.
And in this sense, it's an alarm.
Mm-hmm.
But who is this message directed at?
To his people.
Is it? Or is it directed at the world?
Yeah, the world too. But
He shouldn't have to say a command to his people, don't you do this.
he didn't say that.
You've got to do this to the world because they're not people of faith. So they have to be spoken to in the negative. You better not do this because if you do, you're going to get plagues. That, at least is the way I see it, that's what gets their attention. If any man worship the beast in his image, oh, it gets their attention. Why would God speak in such harsh language?
He's warning them.
He's warning sinners.
Yes, the rebuke and chastening. Basically, if you do this, then this is what it will be happening.
Absolutely. And like Ellen said, yes, the obedience factor comes in, but even before that comes in, people need to ask, why is God speaking such a harsh? I mean, have you heard in recent weeks, some of these pundits out there, at least on the conservative side, they're talking about these mandates. Oh, this is the mark of the beast.
Mm-hmm.
Have you heard that? Or at least it's prefiguring what could be with these inoculations. So people are familiar with the concept, the mark of the beast.
Mm-hmm.
They just don't know what it means. They have all these speculative ideas. And yet have you, any of you ladies heard anybody hitting it on the head? No, it doesn't have anything to do with, or a jab, or you haven't heard anywhere anybody saying what the truth is yet. That day's coming, but it hasn't happened yet. Okay, so that's what I was looking at in that question. Hun, did you have any thoughts? Did you want to say anything about that? No. Okay. Or anybody else? Ellen and Elena spoke. But okay, number 2, from the statements above, we can easily ascertain what the worship and image of the beast and his mark entails. Now, this is a little trickier. Without SOP, can you show them from the Bible who and what these concepts refer to and giving an answer to them that ask you the reason, the hope that is in you with meekness and fear? You don't have to, pull out 20 texts, but if you have 2 or 3 texts, anybody have anything on that?
What's SOP?
Spirit of prophecy.
Spirit of prophecy, okay.
Even the message itself has everything in it. The first angel's message tells, people can read it for themselves and understand, fear God, give glory to, worship.
Okay, so let's start right there, Elena, since you you just mentioned something where I wanted to go next. So this verse 9 and verse 7 have 2 words in it that are the same.
Loud voice.
Oh, yeah, okay. No, I wasn't thinking that, but you're correct. No, I'm thinking more specifically that deals with the answer to this question, the who and the what.
Worship.
Worship. So here's one thing that you can take people to. We just finished Revelation 13 a couple months ago.
Mm-hmm.
And we found out that I think 5 times, I thought it was 8, but it's only 5 times the word. I mean, that's still a lot. 5 times in a chapter, the word worship is mentioned. And if you take them to these passages and tell them to read that, worship connotes what? When you are talking about a beast commanding worship or enforcing worship or legislating worship, everybody in the, well, I shouldn't say that. Maybe people don't know what worship means anymore. But they know it has something to do with religion.
Yeah. Worship.
So you can start there. Here you have worship in verse 9, the beast. And so now you can tell them, well, who's the beast? You got to get that solidified. You know, it takes just a couple, 2-3 verses. We saw that in 13, 17. We could go to, we haven't spent too much time there yet. And you always want to tell people what, if they're spiritual minded, what the truth is before they get to the counterfeit. Or you can use the counterfeit to get to the genuine. So if you first go to the verse 7 where it says, and worship him that made, we all know what that's referring to. And that has a direct link to what part of the Old Testament?
Creation, right?
Creation.
And something in the commandments that says that. In the Decalogue. Fourth commandment.
The Sabbath day.
Because you're dealing with the, and we talked about this, the 3 aspects of what the seal is. That's right in the heart of God's law. Fourth commandment talks about name, title, territory. So you can take people there. Now we know what the genuine is.
The seal.
And so you can ask them, so what would the counterfeit be? Well, if the genuine is the Sabbath day, what's the counterfeit? I mean, it doesn't say, we all know this, but people out there in the world, you want to draw, ask questions in a way that they will think, oh, well, the counterfeit would be another day.
The wrong day.
Man's day.
So that's one way you can do it. I would start with worship, though, because that's what the text begins, if any man worship. And you may want to focus on the, of course, we got right into the mark. We should have looked at I mentioned about the beast. You got to go and take a couple verses to determine what a beast is in the book of Revelation, Daniel 7. And that handout I'm going to send here when we're done, that's a review on that. But also the image. What part of the Bible would you take them to for image worship?
Daniel
3, because the language is all there. When you hear the sound of all types of music, you bow down and worship this image. That sounds like Revelation 13 in the literal. So you can use that as an illustration in the natural, what happened in the time of Nebuchadnezzar, to show what's going to happen in our world when church and state unite. Okay, any other thoughts on 2? If not, we'll go to 3 and wrap it up. In one sentence, based on what we've learned in this lesson, how would you summarize 3 angels' message? What's the takeaway? Okay, Dan, now's your moment.
I did 2 sentences.
That's fine.
I did one on the mark, and then one on my hope, what I hope to stand on, or what to be saved, what I would be standing on. Anyway, so I put down the This is God's final warning for those who go against God's law. Accept man's law of the Sabbath will be a part of the mark and receive the wrath of God, full strength, and be forever lost. And on the other side.
Wait a minute, question. Read that last line again.
I'm not sure exactly. It's just one long sentence with lots of comments.
Read the whole thing again.
Okay. It's God's final warning for those who go against God's law and accepts man's law of the Sabbath will be a part of the mark and receive the wrath of God, full strength, and be forever lost. And the other one is to those who stand on the sea of glass. We must die to self, a deeper death to self in peaceful times, be baptized into Christ's sufferings, and have the faith of Jesus.
Oh, wow. Pretty extensive. Good. Very well done.
Thank you.
Elena, what did you have?
Something about, I said the third angel's message is the everlasting gospel. Here is the patience of the saints, say that they keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus.
Well, it sounds like you just quoted scripture with your answer. That's fine. That's good. Hun, did you have anything?
I kind of started out like Elena. I put the three angels' messages show the gospel in action and seriousness of rejecting the warnings. We are in a war to vindicate the character, thoughts, and feelings of the Godhead and to show where our allegiance is, which will enable us to have the patience of the saints and the faith of Jesus.
Yeah.
That's kind of bringing in a little bit more like Deanne said, but it's kind of a mesh between what Dan and Elena said. It's good. Wow. Ellen, I'd ask you, but I think you've had your mind on all these, studies the last couple of weeks, so you probably haven't done anything on that.
Yeah, thank you. I read through this, but I did not come up with a sentence, to summarize the whole thing. But I believe it's about our lives and our relationship with God and Jesus Christ in terms of salvation, in terms of worshiping him, and in terms of self-denial and being crucified with Christ, in this world. And the results that come out of that, if you don't deny self and also not have a personal relationship with Christ, your life is at stake, And
you all pretty much said the same thing in a general sense: relationship, thoughts and feelings, the character. Elena, you just nailed it with by the way, verse 12, we'll get there maybe next week or two. I think this is the one text that she quotes most often when it comes to explaining what the third angel's message is. She doesn't focus on the beast and the image. That's all part of the bigger picture. But as my wife said, it's a character thing.
Yeah.
Keeping the commandments and having the faith is referencing to the gospel. Yeah. You've got the law and the gospel coming together in the human life. That's it. And when we get there in a couple of weeks, I'm going to read a statement in Testimonies to Ministers that I think summarizes, you can't improve on scripture, but she enlarges on it. And it's all encompassing what the three angels' message is in one paragraph. Covers all the bases. So good. I appreciate you ladies. I didn't even put anything down because I wanted to hear from you. Now that you shared with me your thoughts, I'll take from each of you and I'll put my own thoughts down. But it's good. Very well said. And another reason why I wanted to ask you if you've done this, because you have to think in putting answer down. You have to think, what am I saying? What would I say to people if they ask me that question? How would I answer that? And once you write things down, it's your signature. This is what I believe it is at this point I'm at spiritually. And, the gospel should be simple. Elena, you hit it on the head. Revelation 14:12. Yeah. That's not only the gospel, that's the three angels' messages. Yeah. Which is the gospel is the foundation. And then you have all the other parts that we've looked at so far.
12:17 also.
12:17 is dealing with the testimony of Jesus. Now, we have looked at that in chapter 1. There is a little difference between the faith of Jesus and the testimony of Jesus. And we can look at that some more. But yeah, 12:17. 12:17 brings in the warring elements. The dragon is out to make war.
Right.
And of course, you link that with obviously 14:12. You know who he's going to be making war with. Yeah. And we see it. We see where our world's headed. I mean, you look at the fight just between freedom lovers and those who don't want you to have freedom. And we know where this is going to end up and who the two parties are going to be eventually. God is so gracious. I was telling Mary earlier, how much time God has given his people to see what's happening. And even people in the world are waking up, especially in the evangelical world, because they're saying, if this continues, we're not going to have a country anymore. Freedom's gone. And we're almost there. Of course, they don't know how the end game is, but they're going to find out soon. They're going to find out soon. Another thought, just as we see I don't think there's a human being alive on the planet, unless they have their head in the sand, who don't know that there has been a pandemic and a vaccine out there to get people to do certain things. The Sabbath Sunday issue is going to become even more prominent. She makes a statement. Every case will be given enough information to decide for or against the truth. So it's got to be permeating our world, just like these mandates and the vaccine and the COVID business. Okay, our time's up. Went a little over, but that's okay. All right, well, I think we had a good study here tonight, and I will continue on with the same theme for next week, and we'll cover verse 10 and 11, and maybe get into 12. We'll see if we might even be able to finish everything next week. I don't know, but if not, then the week after. So we can thank the Lord for that, and just keep praying and studying, because this is what we've seen happening in our world. Is all wake-up call. The time is nearing for the deliverance of God's people.